All right. That brings us to our next section, the opinion section. This week's opinion section is brought to you by no one because we have no sponsors still. But if you would like to be our sponsor, please reach out at McAfee at fulldivepodcast.com. All right. For this opinion section, we kind of already hinted at it, but maybe you're on the YouTube channel and are totally in the dark still.
So we're talking about VR safety. It's so easy to get lost in the world of VR, not think about your surroundings. And some headsets have great safeguards built in, some don't at all. So how do we stay safe? What do we do to not end up having to wrap our entire world in bubble wrap to keep ourselves safe? Adam, I think you have a good story about a time you were not very safe.
It was in the early days of my VR headset, and I
heard this.
was playing Pavlov. Pavlov, and it was one of the first times that I kind of lost myself in VR a little bit, and I grabbed the knife off my chest, and I went to shank a guy, and I punched the wall hard. And, this is not an altogether uncommon experience, but it's something that, honestly, as VR moves forward, needs to, and as we create these more and more immersive experiences, needs to be a bigger point of discussion than maybe it has been so far.
Mm-hmm. So for those who haven't been into VR, generally the way that they try to save people is when you first boot up your VR system, the first thing you want to do in your room is you create a space visually through the headset where, or in the case of the Vive or the Index, I guess you have to walk around with a controller. But you can set a safe space, and then when you're in VR, when you approach that space, either with your hands or your head, you suddenly see this grid system around you that shows you, okay, this is your barrier, and it lets you sort of get your bearings in the real world and step back to the center of your play space. And that's the default thing. Now, clearly this isn't enough because people are still leaping into TVs and still punching walls.
Well,
so
and
do you guys have any special solutions?
They're not always clear enough in the Guardian setup. So it says measure out your full play space. And so what people don't realize is they take and they measure it all the way to the wall.
Yep.
Yes.
That's not going to help you. Yeah. Because when you're in mid swing, even as your arm's approaching that wall and suddenly the boundary comes up, it's too late. Your hand's already going for the wall. So you need to set this boundary back at basically your full wingspan away from you so that if you get to the boundary, you can't possibly cross it. Now, the other problem that they had, so when I set up my Oculus Quest in my studio, I can't set the space small enough to be able to reach my arms past it and not punch anything and still have what it called an adequate play space to even make this work. So you try that and you end up, it's breaking your immersion because you keep touching the boundary and you end up just shutting it off is probably worst case scenario because you're like, okay, I can't stand this. Then you're in a real unsafe zone. So that's kind of the Oculus experience. I've heard it's similar, but is it exactly the same on the Vive?
The Vive is a little bit different. It goes through the Steam VR setup, but I think that the boundaries show up even when your hand starts to get close to the boundary and not just your headset. Yeah. I don't know if it's the same way.
It is.
But Steam also does a little bit of trickery where you measure out your space and then it slightly brings in your boundary.
Oh.
And so everywhere you can slightly go outside your boundary and be just fine.
See, Oculus should have adopted that little bit because it really doesn't. You set that thing right where it is, and then you have to be about to touch it before it starts to warn you.
Right. It kind of needs a little suggestion. It has suggestions when you set it up, but it should add the new suggestion of give, if you can, give I don't know, half a foot to a foot at least of some barrier around your play space.
Yeah, at least, because I mean, if you reach your arm out, what is that? About 1.5 feet for most people, at least, that they can reach out. Well, and this is still PC we're talking. So for all of our PSVR lovers out there, there is almost no safeguards built in for the PSVR system. So the only real safeguard it has, because okay, when they designed PSVR, they designed it to be sitting down on your couch and playing. That's why they didn't make it 360. They didn't suggest standing. That was all the developers and the people that wanted these experiences and just made it happen on PSVR. It wasn't supposed to. So they thought this wasn't going to be an issue. PSVR, the only time it will warn you is if you start to walk outside of the zone where the camera can see you. So if you go too far to the left, too far to the right, and that has no bearing on what's in that zone, it's just if you get out of it. But that means you can get as close to that camera as you want to before it will most likely warn you. And where does Sony tell you to put the camera? Right on top of your flat screen expensive TV and right in the freaking center of it. So what can you do? You can run right up when you're playing Creed and punch the TV. And there's many videos. Check them out on YouTube. Many VR fail videos. They're hilarious, but a lot of TVs have gotten broken because of that.
I think PlayStation's in cahoots with the TV makers.
Probably. Sony sells TVs, so.
You're right. I sense a conspiracy here.
Yes.
Break the TV, a little notification pops up. Do you need a new TV? And it provides links to their website.
Yep, affiliate links. My biggest suggestion, no matter what VR headset you have, how good the safeguards are, buy yourself either some interlocking foam mats or a heavy rug, something that when you step off of it, your brain's going to go, whoa, something changed, and slow you down. Put that in the center of your play space and stick to it. That is going to do more than any of these safeguards combined. And if you buy those interlocking mats, you can make them as big as you need or as small as you need. There's even specific mats built for VR. They're overly expensive, but VR Ninjas makes one. It's like $80, but it's a thick foam. And the front of it also has a slightly different, like a chain link pattern, so that you can feel when you're facing forward if you're not supposed to be. And then you can also, if you start to step on that mat, you're going to realize something's wrong. That's my top tip for safety. That's going to help keep people from getting too wild with your VR headset and risking everything you own.
It's a good suggestion. I use a rug, but it's just at the borders, so it's not like I really step off of it and like, oh, that's my cue. And let's see, that's just here. When my studio, I don't have anything, so maybe I should implement. But it's so small that it's one of those places where if I make it any smaller than this actual space I have available, it's like, you can't play. So,
Yep.
So you gotta like, I have my own solutions for that. But first, Adam, do you have anything in particular?
I have. So in my experience, the biggest problems that occur with safety aren't actually the people that own the VR headsets. It's when you invite friends or family over and they try out the VR headsets. And so I think the number one way to stay safe is to strap on the VR headset onto your friends and give them a quick safety tutorial. Sort of walk them up to the boundary, show them what the boundary looks like and say, don't pass this point. And honestly, I wish that they offered that for first-time VR users. Like, that is the absolute most safe way that I've been able to show VR to my friends and family. And I wish that Steam or Oculus would have that sort of tutorial in-game in the VR headset. You put it on, it has you walk up to your boundary and just show you how to be safe in VR. That's what I wish.
You're touching on something actually that I hugely wish they had, and that is a tutorial, because I am constantly showing my VR setup to people because it's so fun to share. And I would love a whole, like you're saying, a whole tutorial that just shows you safety, how to use the grip and everything. Like, I have there's some titles that like kind of like at least warm you up to VR, and that's what I use. Like Oculus First Contact is my go-to. Like, I'll put someone in this and then we'll move on to whatever's next. But yeah, just something to get someone familiar with VR itself, not just like the immersion of VR, would be, I think, pretty useful. I would love that. What's
your success been? Have you never had any accidents doing that with people?
Well, I mean, I did just tell you the story of where I punched a wall.
But that was you. That was you. So how have the guests been? Have they acclimated to it and not done anything wrong? Or even after you're... Because there's a meme that you'll see a lot, especially on Reddit. It's like the SpongeBob meme where he's holding some sort of scroll and it'll say anything, but it'll say like, hey, stick to the Guardian Zone. And then they immediately throw it in the fire and let it.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it's SpongeBob, but I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah. So it's like, that's even no matter what warning you give, sometimes people just do whatever they want the minute they get the headset on. So I'm curious, with your extra care you're giving, does it seem to really hone it in for them that they need to learn this and do it right?
It has helped every single person except one
Uh-oh.
who got way too excited and competitive when trying to beat the high score of his wife.
Let's
And
hear
in
it.
his exuberance, punched a wall, of course.
Beat Saber, I presume.
It wasn't Beat Saber. It was
Oh.
an archery game called Hollow Point.
Oh.
Oh,
And in Hollow
Interesting.
Point, I don't know if you've heard of Hollow Point.
no.
It is a archery game. You're in a studio or a dojo, and you have to shoot arrows at these different targets. And sometimes the targets will fire back at you, and you have to dodge out of the way. And so it is it really gets your blood pumping. And for this one guy in particular, he really got enthusiastic about it and dodged into a wall. But other than that, one
That's
friend
funny.
who got way too competitive, it
Funny
has
to
worked
imagine.
perfectly. My in IRL safety tutorial has done a pretty
Mhm.
good job of helping show people that, hey, this is awesome. This is pretty immersive. You really got to be aware of the wall.
The wall.
I don't think we've touched on this. I think this actually might be a good topic to talk about in coming weeks, but I don't know how many of you actually enjoy or actively play VR horror games. That
Occasionally.
that is one thing where no matter what kind of warning you give someone, their fear and terror is going to
Oh, yeah.
override everything you've done to try to convince them. So, I mean, there's some videos of like people literally just running, turning around and running as fast as they can from the scary thing until they either hit a wall, they run out
Yep.
of cord, or something happens. So there are certain games that, another nod to Beat Saber, they did a good job making a game that actually keeps you in place and playing without risking it. And then there's other games like horror games where you're going to completely lose who you are, where you are, and bad things are just possibly going to happen. So in those cases, put some pillows in front of your TV, put things around, like do whatever you can to just make it as safe as possible. But no, if you have a friend over and you put them in something scary, you're putting your stuff at risk. So you got to
Mhm.
just accept that.
Speaking of pillows in front of TVs, so this was my solution for VR safety when I was in this small space that like had no space, and kind of like I didn't put pillows in front of my TV, but what I did do was I went to a Lowe's and just bought some super cheap TV-sized cardboard, but it wasn't like the one layer cardboard. It was like the really thick stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just bought that super cheap and cut it to size. The cutting was the hardest part, to be honest. It took more time than going to Lowe's and coming back. So, but you can use like industrial foam or whatever, and just put that in front of your TV. And people have punched that twice now. At that, I'm a crazy person. I bring guess even into that space, and that has saved my TV so many times. Just a barrier that doesn't weigh a lot. It puts, you have to be careful because if your like TV is like sitting on something, then someone is still fully capable of actually knocking your TV over. So take account for that. But if it's mounted or just mine was already like up against a wall, and I tested it ahead of time, and it was okay to lean back. Um, just put something really cheap in front of the TV. Maybe it'll help paint over it if you want it to like look nicer or something. But that went a long way for me.
And that's a really good point. So far, we've talking primarily about software issues to safety or fixes for safety, but hardware issues is a very good way of, actually making sure that things stay safe IRL. One thing that I wish, and one thing that Vive actually does pretty well, is they have a breakaway box, and that maybe won't protect your wall. But if you get too far away and the cord gets around you, instead of pulling your whole desktop off of it, there's a little breakaway box where it'll become unplugged, game will shut down, keeps everything pretty safe. But one thing that I wish, I don't know if you're familiar with the index controllers. I use the index controllers right now. And they have this nice big ring around it, around the back of your wrist for tracking. I wish that they would just have something or put foam around that, or put something around the front of it too, just with foam on it. Just so if you do happen to accidentally go out, these little, foam brass knuckles will punch the wall instead of your fist, and hopefully won't as seriously damage anything as actually punching something would.
Right. Yeah, like like same with like these Oculus controllers. They have these big old rings on the top of them. How hard would it be and how expensive would it be to just install some like rubber there, not plastic?
Exactly.
I bet that would go a long way towards at least like if if that hits someone, it's not going to hurt as much in like a very small sense. I don't know. It would just, I would feel safer knowing that these had rubber around them, not plastic. I don't know. Maybe it's hard to get a signal through that.
It is, and like there's actually quite a few silicone grips now that will cover the ring, but you got to check the reviews because some of them have big enough holes that the infrared lights still show, and some of them don't at all, and feel like these completely destroy your tracking and they're useless. So there is those that people have tried in their solutions, and I went to a VR arcade that had Vives, and they had actual plastic cages built around the sensors on the outside,
seen those.
which were probably helpful, but man, they made them strangely more front heavy. Even the Vive controllers are already pretty front heavy, and these things made it even worse. You felt like you're having to like hold up an axe from the bottom of it when you were holding these controllers. PlayStation VR is one that the balls on top, people don't realize, are soft and squishy.
Right.
It makes such a difference when you hit stuff on accident with those. It really absorbs the impact and it doesn't break anything. So yeah, there's
Almost
definitely
like they thought people would do that.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be more in the way of that, especially because with these Oculus controllers, for those of you who don't have them, these rings on top aren't very strong either. There's tons of pictures of where they've hit stuff and they crack pretty easily. So you need to safeguard these more than pretty much any other VR controller on the market.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we're going to wrap things up there. We're now approaching. It's hard to say because we had the technical difficulty in the middle of the podcast, so my little time code stamp is off. But I think we're at roughly an hour here. Good time to wrap up. Before we go, just want to mention again, we have the giveaway happening. That's going to be on the Discord channels in time for the upcoming podcast. So if you give me 1 second, I can tell you literally that date. The 29th. On the 29th, we will be giving away. Let's bring my hands back. We will be giving away, let's see, what was it? Super Hot VR. Again, for that, that's just the general Discord community. Just hop into our Discord. We'll have a link below. We'll have a link in the YouTube channel, links everywhere. And that's how you can get into the runnings for Super Hot VR. And then we have Skyrim VR for our patron community. That's $5 a month over at patreon.com/FullDiveGaming, I believe it is. And if I'm wrong, check the description. And I think that's it.
Yes,
Podcast
and those are
number 2.
Steam VR codes.
Right.
Steam VR.
Yes, sorry, Oculus people that want just Oculus games for some reason. And that's it. That brings a wrap to the second Full Dive Game podcast. Full Dive Gaming.
Thank you.
See you later, everyone.
Next week.
Goodbye.